I think there's a little bit of the opposite of that in the finance world. They like don't care about being cool. They don't care about like the UI potentially. They're like, does it help me save 5 hours? Does it help me reduce risks that I'm not going to present the wrong numbers?
That spark of innovation, it's just waiting for the perfect combination of tools and talent to bring it to life. Welcome to Pitch, Build, Scale. I'm your host, Chris Fanchi, a recovering startup founder, veteran SaaS marketer, turned dev tech enthusiast and growth specialist. Each episode, we connect with the builders, the visionaries, and the problem solvers who are redefining what's possible with today's technology and pioneering the websites, apps, and software products of tomorrow. These are the conversations that transform how we build, how we sell, and how we scale technology businesses in a world where the tech evolves by the minute. Ready to stay ahead of the curve? This is Pitch, Build, Scale.
Hello and welcome to today's episode. We have a very exciting guest. For those of you just joining the podcast, we are Big North Marketing and specialize in helping dev shops and SaaS companies scale their revenue. So if you want to learn how to take your SaaS or dev business to the next level, make sure to stick around. And if you're interested in a free growth consultation, just drop the word growth in the DMs. We're really excited to have today's guest, Sebastian Perez Lawrence, co-founder of Rockhopper. With a background in corporate finance, Sebastian saw firsthand how error-prone and inefficient spreadsheet workflows can be. That experience led him to build Rockhopper, a platform that acts like GitHub for spreadsheets, helping finance teams streamline reviews, reduce risk, and scale smarter. Sebastian, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris.
So to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey? Where did you start off and how did you end up getting into tech?
Super interesting. I got into tech as most people, I think, who probably in the early 2000s, the technology sort of startup ecosystem was peaking. You saw a ton of high valuations. You saw a ton of capital flow into new startups. And I was going to business school at the exact time. And I was naive and I thought I could create my own startup based off of my experience working in corporate finance and dealing with spreadsheets and trying to solve that issue around just the friction involved with understanding what people are working on, that peer-to-peer review. And for me, I just thought that was a perfect inflection point because I was in a crossroads of what was I going to do next. I originally wanted to be a CFO of a large company, and that was the main reason going to business school. But then obviously you meet a lot of great people, diverse backgrounds, and then you get sort of that entrepreneurial bug that you just get with a cohort class of people from all over and different backgrounds. And to me, that just gave way to trying to do a startup. And then I met my co-founder, David, 20 years experience working in Silicon Valley, scaling engineering teams. And so he kind of came up with the solution around GitHub for spreadsheets and then how we could scale that across finance teams and also pick up on the trend around AI agents and trying to integrate and understand what they're doing and tracking their work and making sure that type of work in the future is not error prone. We can document it. And for us, I think we kind of now hit an inflection point again where I feel like we're picking up on this trend that's important for CFOs and for controllers in large organizations.
So how long have you been going with Rockhoppers at this point?
It will be 2 years in May.
And what was that first aha moment that made you realize that this is actually a problem that is begging for a solution and that there's actually a market for it?
I would say flipping back to late summer of 2024, I had met a publicly traded CFO that was super interesting background, really into technology, really interested in adopting new tools. And he had this problem around spreadsheets. He has a company that has about 140 employees under his function. Everyone uses spreadsheets day in and day out. It was a very complex organization. It was in real estate, so add the complexity of all, the lease properties and managing all the assumptions. And for him, he just saw it as a productivity tool, but then he had a longer play of how that could be integrated and be potentially human in the loop of reviewing work that's eventually done by AI agents and getting better data quality. For him, it was garbage in, garbage out using AI agents. And he saw Rockhopper as this sort of middle layer of bringing us in. And then based off of that, and the way he talked about it and how he was excited about our product, David and I looked at each other, we're like, wow, okay, this is a big company that sees the potential in us and also how we could become a bigger company than where we were, say, 6 months ago. And so that was very, very, very exciting. We signed a six-figure contract with them a couple months later, and now we're off to the races with them. We onboarded them last week, actually. I was down in Houston. Super fun to actually meet the people that you're talking with over Zoom or video. And our next step is to onboard about 50 users in their company. And potentially the next sort of phase of this would be integrating with their AI agents that they currently use today, that they're kind of missing that capability that Rockhopper can provide.
So would you say you're kind of in a pilot or maybe a beta stage at this point, or is the product officially out for the public?
I would say it's a private beta. We're working with them to refine the product. We had a lot of feedback prior to launching. We did a lot of testing. We did a lot of feedback from various different cohorts, CFOs, controllers, different industries prior to launching with them. But I think we're really focused with this specific customer. They're a lighthouse customer for us. I think we can learn a lot. The customer is a multi-year contract too. So for us, this was very much a relationship based off building something that we came to the table providing value, but also that we see that we could grow into a much larger company and they would be the perfect candidate and customer to test, to provide feedback, and to grow into what we think a lot of other companies will want to buy in the future.
So generally speaking, what is your target? Is there a certain niche of companies that you're aiming to work with?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our first customers in commercial real estate. And so we see a pull from that market. Generally, I think commercial real estate is really slow to adopt technology. So that's a component of where it's exciting approaching these people that already currently use spreadsheets. It's sort of a legacy, individual tooling that they know. Everyone can pick it up pretty quickly. It's low barrier of entry. And then what we're saying is like, hey, we'll enhance that entire workflow for you. So we're embedding ourselves within a very complex kind of arcane industry and saying, hey, we'll bring innovation to you guys. And I think that's a attractive narrative when we speak to CFOs or controllers or any type of financial professional. So for us, yeah, we're really focusing on real estate firms, enterprisey. I think about enterprise like 500 million in revenue to like 2 billion in revenue. I think that's our sweet spot where there's a lot of operations, there's a lot of investment decisions being made, and then you obviously have the CFO making sure the books are correct.
Mhm. What is the integration process? This isn't just something that they can go sign up on your website and get right in, right? This is gonna be something that's a lot more granular than that.
Yeah, their first couple customers, it's very much a white glove service, and I think that's kind of key to making sure you understand how the customer is using the product. You can really kind of get the feel and the feedback that you want by being on the ground. I was there in Houston last week for 3 days, and that gave me the impression that it's better to do that type of process early on. Do you have the idea of setting up another launch site where folks can just use it, test it out. And I think that will be a really critical way of a go to market and kind of have people do a self-service model. The onboarding itself from a technical standpoint only takes 24 hours. We work with someone in their IT department. They push it down to their Azure cloud and we push and integrate with their OneDrive and their Microsoft SharePoint. So that's our current integration process. The next phase of that would be integrating with their current enterprise AI agents that they're using, which will be another interesting aspect of the company and the product itself.
Is the goal to make it eventually become mostly hands-off where companies will be able to do the implementation themselves?
I think there's a world like that. I think it makes sense that when you think about the Microsoft ecosystem or the Google ecosystem, is that it's very much a self-serve model. I would say Google's probably a little bit easier to adopt user-wise. It seems to be like just generally better for user adoption versus Microsoft, but both have this sort of touch and feel where you can go add a user, get permissions, you kind of know what's going on more or less. It has all this blogs and support related to the product. And I think there's a world where we get to that point as well. Uh, because we're dealing with finance folks who use these spreadsheets, it just makes sense to kind of orient the product to a more self-serve model eventually.
What has been the challenge with implementing AI in some of these companies where they're maybe a little slower to adopt technology, especially when you're talking about sensitive data like financial data? What has been the challenge, and how have your customers been? How receptive have they been to that?
I think the first question is really when I ask the CFO, it's like, what process do you want to try to automate? And then you start peeling back the onion a little bit because I think a lot of CFOs generally are excited about adopting AI agents or agentic workflows, doing automated work. But I think for a lot of them, they don't trust the process because in a way it deals with numbers. It also deals with sensitive information. And once you kind of open the gates to say a company that is looking at your data, training on your data, outside of privacy, IP of the company is really the data. And that's what makes companies valuable. And you could make, it depends on the industry, but say for instance, you take a Bloomberg or a Thomson Reuters or an S&P where I used to work. That company gives access to a startup or an AI company, really they create their products and services based off the product that they've attained and accumulated and created products for decades. And now you're giving that to another company to essentially make something more efficient or automate it. So there is a barrier of entry, I think, for a lot of organizations that think about AI is how much access do they give to a company? And then what is the ROI? I think when you deal with CFOs, they always think about ROI. What is the ROI? What is the ROI? Is it going to save me money, make me money, or is it going to make me look good? So I in that category of like how I think about it is like you really have to be strategic. And that's I think where Rockhopper comes in, where we can say, hey, we're using your existing tooling. We'll make better data quality decisions. We'll embed ourselves within your current workflows. And by the way, we're also working with these enterprise tools that are want to give you help, but we're actually making that process better for you to adopt these tools. And we'll guide you along the process. So it's been really kind of an evolving narrative and an evolving selling point as well. It's like, okay, where do you fit in to the process of adopting AI? And I think that conversation is one where you have to have it over multiple conversations than just getting on a line and selling it like directly to you. So that's what I've learned so far.
Are you guys handling any of the client data, or is everything kept within their data storage or servers?
Currently, it's kept in their data storage and servers. We do have ideas of like keeping everything on our own S3 bucket on AWS. I think most people feel comfortable with that as long as we're not accessing it. I think a public company, especially, there's non-public information in these spreadsheets. There's obviously could be material in some way before, obviously go to earnings call. And so we ring fence that whole entire process around it. And I think that's probably the easiest way. I've heard of other founders white label their actual product and then have it hosted on their servers. And I think that's probably another great way of saying, okay, we could make our own separate S3 bucket just for you. You have access to it. It's your data. Here it stands, but we'll update it, say, monthly or quarterly with new product updates. And I've seen that happen as to be kind of an attractive way to get an enterprise customer to feel comfortable that their data is not going to be manipulated or taken or accessed.
Yeah. You mentioned monthly or quarterly updates. How difficult is it right now with the pace of technology to keep up with your solution, building something brand new, while also there's new technologies, there's new AIs, there's new capabilities coming out on the market on what seems like a weekly basis?
I think about it this way: be successful, you have to be very narrow-minded in a way of like what you're going to do. And I think a lot of it is just noise. It's good to pay attention to it, but I try to put like my blinders on and say, this is what we're going to do. We have a strategy. Let's stick to it. Obviously, you go back to it and assess it. But to me, all of the kind of noise and trying to mimic what other people are doing, I'd rather just focus on what our customers are saying. How are we solving the pain point? Can we solve it better and better and better every single day? And that's kind of what I focus in on versus all of the new features that are coming out. Because to some degree, I think of it in degrees of like these features and capabilities are just getting inching further and further along, but it's kind of taking away from how we're talking to the customer, how we're solving it. It's good to pay attention to it, but I think my answer to that is just being very specific on what are you going to try to solve, how are you going to do it, and keeping with the strategy.
Are you finding clients are eager to adopt AI technologies?
Yes, going back to the previous kind of comment, it's really a balancing act where you need to provide value up front. And if you don't provide value up front, they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Because when you think about onboarding a new customer, it takes a lot of effort for them to get the right people in place, have them sit in a room, have them adopt a new solution, train on it. And if they don't see the value up front, it's going to be very difficult for adoption, especially for larger organizations where they may be going through restructuring. They have a new management team, new people are coming on, they have a brand new strategy and a new product release coming. And so their entire focus is now on something else versus you. So I really think, especially I've gotten this feedback from CFOs, is like, hey, get to the point. Don't bury the lead. Show me what you built. Show me, well, tell me the problem you're trying to solve, and then show me the solution and show me the value that you're bringing. And I think you have to be very direct, unfortunately, and not dance around like, oh, we're going to do this in the future. And then like, we'll promise you this. And I think that's a direct feedback I've gotten from one of my customers is like, hey, you're the type of founder that doesn't overpromise. You always couch everything. And I think that's probably likely my background in being in corporate finance. I'm not a startup person where you sort of overpromise and then maybe you underdeliver. And I don't maybe fall into that archetype, but I think that's my superpower in the way I communicate and the way I make people feel comfortable that, hey, we're going to start with this. I'm not going to BS that this is what we're thinking and how we're going to progress along. And I think that also is conducive around how we signed a long-term 3-year contract with a CFO.
Yeah, and CFOs are famously skeptical, I would say, of new solutions and anything that you're bringing in front of a CFO. They want to see the hard numbers. How is this going to improve our process numerically? Can you prove it to us ahead of time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of data points. They love numbers. They love, hey, do you have a case study? They love referencing something. There's a benchmark in this. What does Gartner say? All these different things. And I think, unfortunately, you just have to know your customer and you have to know your user. I'm sure this is different when you talk about product managers and you're selling into them, or you're talking to developers who are okay not knowing what the outcome is and just willing to try a new product out because they just think it's cool. I think there's a little bit of the opposite of that in the finance world. They like don't care about being cool. They don't care about like the UI potentially. They're like, does it help me save 5 hours? Does it help me reduce risks that I'm not going to present the wrong numbers? And I think you really have to like speak their language to really get at, okay, what do they care about?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about where you see the company going. What is the next big milestone for Rockhopper? Are you focused more on enterprise growth, product innovation, or expanding into different verticals?
I think the next one in our sort of phase of the company is really making sure the product that we currently have can integrate with AI agents. We're on our way to do that. I think in the next quarter or so, there's some enterprise platforms that do agentic workflows, or they say they do agentic workflows. And I think that's interesting because those companies are already in the enterprise space. They've sold to large companies, and then we're thinking about integrating with them. I think to us, that will be a really great proof point of validating that, like, okay, this is the right path that we're on, that we're actually providing a lot of value for people to adopt AI agents. And we were like the missing component of that. And I think ultimately our longer term strategy is we want to be that layer of quality assurance that sits on top of numbers. So at the end user reporting, CFOs, internal auditors, committees, boards, whatever, they're receiving the right numbers. It's been audited and reviewed, either Rockhopper being the human in the loop process of that, or just interjecting someone in the organization that can review the work and make sure it's right. And I think for us, that's our longer term vision of how do we say reduce costs around audit for millions of dollars that are spent each year around this? How does Rockhopper cut those costs? And I think that's a kind of a ultimate vision of where Rockhopper will be in 10 years.
So, what would a breakout year look like for you at Rockhopper? Say the next 12 months.
A breakout year looks like, $1 million in ARR. I think that's everyone's sort of early stage milestone, reaching that. I think having 2 or 3 more customers, like the enterprise customer that we have today, would be great. Ones that are looking for AI solutions, and we help them get to that point. I think that would be great. I think we would have a really nice breakout year for 2020.
Are you guys actively seeking out new clients, or are you kind of waiting out this first beta or pilot program before you really start expanding out?
We're having conversations with folks. I think when you're dealing with enterprise sales, you kind of always have a touch point with people, like making sure, hey, we're alive. This is what we're doing with this customer. But ultimately, I think we are thinking about how do we make this one customer that we have a longer term relationship be happy, and then see how they react to the product, the feedback, refine it. But also, I think it's important down the line to pick up other data points from other customers to solidify, you know, are we thinking about the product the right way? Are we going after the market? Is there maybe it's not real estate, maybe it's another industry. And I think that's important too, to double check on that type of things as well.
Do you have plans for how you are going to go out to market once you get to that point?
Yeah, we have a couple of ways we're going to go out to market. The more sort of high touch points that we realize in enterprise sales is having a community. One way we thought about this is building an advisor network. The advisor network acts in a sorts as a informal between our customers and us. They provide a lot of references, referrals. Some have already done that actually. They also provide a lot of product feedback. They're folks that are decision makers in their respective fields and industry and their company. And I think that's a good indicator of how we think about selling into larger organizations and what the thought process is like. The other component is more of a partnership with advisors slash as consultants that are in the real estate space. I think using that as a channel partnership will be pretty important as well, like making those connections with the right people. And so I think that when we turn on the taps, that will likely be our 2 main high touch areas versus what everyone else does, which is like LinkedIn and email campaigns and cold phone calling. They have their merits. And I think to a lot of it makes sense to do those things, because you just need to have a lot of touch points in a lot of people's lives. And, I understand the strategy, but to really kind of get a higher accuracy or higher probability, I think you need to have like really high touch types of go to market. And that's kind of what we're thinking about.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a big challenge today. As many tools as there are out there for easy outreach and making those connections, they're surface level connections, right? You're not really building relationships, and with enterprise clients, that relationship is a big part of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, are you guys currently raising funds? Have you raised any money so far?
Yes, we've raised some money. We bootstrapped mostly. We're in the process of raising right now, mostly from a couple of venture capitalists and some family offices. I think when you're talking about enterprise tooling, you really need to speak to the right investors. And it's really a dating game, just finding the right partner slash investor that understands your industry, understands the problem, I think is key to investments in our area, especially early stage. So that's kind of the process where we're at today.
How have you found fundraising to be in this current environment?
I think it depends on who you talk to, but for me, I think it's interesting because the talk about AI agents and like AI general seems to be like a buzzword that everyone's using. Like 2 years ago or 3 years ago is like blockchain or Web3, and now it's like AI. And I think to be authentic to that, really for us, because we're not AI native, I've noticed that it's a little bit more difficult versus we're building into AI. And that has been sort of a challenge, I think, to communicate, because I think most investors are like, well, the innovation is happening directly in AI. And I don't disagree with that.
Mm,
Definitely don't disagree with that. I think when you're building a solution for enterprise, though, you want to make sure it works. You want to make sure that you can provide value up front. Based off our experience and what we've seen with some other founders like fizzling out at the beginning, that was a major concern for us. So the way our strategy is like, hey, we build a product that's useful on the ground when they implement it on day one. Then we build into it. And so that has really been our narrative. And how that relates to investor calls, I think the biggest boom for us is when we picked up our first customer. Traction will always beat out, or for the most part, beat out kind of investing, getting money from founders. Having traction is like the number one thing that you need to have. And I think that was a key to getting more dollars in the door.
mm. Yeah, when I was in the startup space, you always hear that ideas are a dime a dozen, right? It's people invest in teams that can execute on it. Nothing indicates execution better than having traction, having customers already.
Exactly.
So, if someone listening wanted to support your mission, what kind of collaboration or connection would be most valuable to you right now?
The best type of relationship that we would love right now is having one where you could join our advisor network. I think if you have a background as a CFO, VP of finance, controller, director of finance, I think those types of positions that they speak to you and you're in one of those, I think that would really help us out. We're really looking for outside perspective. We're looking to understand different use cases. And also just to get to know you. We're building a community. We already have 10 CFOs on our advisor network, one controller. So we have 11 folks in total. And for us, they're just a way that we can bounce ideas off from them. We meet with them monthly. And it's something that we feel David and I can tap into in the long term. And we want to build a relationship with you guys. And I think that would be a great way to get involved.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Sebastian. I've really enjoyed it. Great getting your insights and learning about what Rockhopper is up to. Can you tell folks where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find us at rockhopper.co, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Handle is Sebastian Perez Lawrence. Great seeing everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And to all of you listening, please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review, as it'll help us be found by more people. And as always, keep pitching, keep building, and keep scaling. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pitch Build Scale. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast provider so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you next time.